Welcome back to the green screen, and here this morning with Tom Jackson, who's made the long trek from the office next door. We've shared a wall for a while, Tom.
That's right, yeah, a number of years now.
That's right.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for coming in. So
Thank you.
we originally got acquainted when I heard about one of your projects. I think it was the project in Iraq, when that was the first project I had sort of heard about.
Right,
and,
Greetings from Missile Street.
Yeah. And then subsequent to that, Peter Vandermark got you and me together. And then we worked on, I edited and did some shooting for Out of Balance, which was a critical look at ExxonMobil. So what are you working on these days?
Well, in a sense, it's a little bit of a follow-up to Out of Balance. It relates to climate change once again. But whereas Out of Balance was kind of based on my own personal realizations about climate change, which took me quite a bit of time. I was one of the folks who thought the jury was still out for a while there. But then in the middle of the last decade, it started to become impossible for me to keep denying or doubting the whole thing.
So you made that arc too?
I made that arc, and then, as you said, we did Out of Balance, which got a fair amount of attention in film festivals and a couple of television broadcasts, and did pretty well as an independent documentary like that goes. And then last year, early 2010, a couple of things happened that I found very upsetting. I had thought that there were a number of years there in the end of the last decade into this decade where more and more people were appreciating the problem and understanding the problem and being concerned about climate change and what can we do about it. Last year, then the Massey coal mining disaster happened, and of course the BP oil spill, and both of those things were tragic on many levels, obviously. And for myself, and I know a lot of other people, they made me think, why are we still having to deal with disasters like this? Why are we still so dependent on fossil fuels, which we know are dangerous from cradle to grave and on into the future? And yet, here we are, again, with two huge disasters. And so I got it into my head that I wanted to look at just the past few years, a sort of post an inconvenient truth look at what has happened with particularly the American public's understanding and concern about the issue of climate change. And in fact, lo and behold, as I was going through the research process, a Gallup poll came out that said that, if anything, the understanding and concern of the American public has gone backwards in the last few years. That's very alarming, for anyone who really appreciates and understands the issue. And thanks to a lot of scientists and experts like Bill McKibben, I feel like I've learned a lot about that issue in the last 5 or 6 years. So I felt like I wanted to do something that was an expose of, instead of just looking at ExxonMobil, which had spearheaded a disinformation campaign for many years, I wanted to look at the fossil fuel industry in general and the different, maybe for lack of a better term, lackeys that, help them out in different ways, whether it's politicians who are essentially in the pocket of these companies, or, the skeptics, which we got into some in Out of Balance. The individuals, these are individuals from different think tanks that are funded largely by fossil fuel companies, and they go out and get onto certain television news networks, and they say, oh, there's not a problem here, or they say, well, if there's a problem, there's nothing we can do about it, and we don't want to upset the economy or whatever. Well, the economy's already upset, and many of us, and I know that you and I are on the same page with this one, believe that if anything, moving towards a green economy is the answer on a whole bunch of levels, not only the climate change level, but revitalizing the economy as well. Mm-hmm. So,
now, one of the things that was great to work on in Out of Balance, and it looks like you're working in the same tradition on At Any Cost, that you assemble a great bunch of folks to speak with.
Oh yeah.
I think of it in Out of Balance. There was Bill McKibben. There was Elizabeth
Colbert.
Yep. There was Michael Oppenheimer. Thinking of who other? Well, anyway, there were
Gilbspan.
Yes, great folks, fascinating folks, people who have done a heck of a lot of research. I think of Bill McKibben, who's really been working in this area for a number of years, and it helps that he went on David Letterman, and he's become a rock star in this field. Very exciting to see.
I feel fortunate to have been able to interview him again for At Any Cost.
Great,
right,
he's with you again.
He is, and he's in the clip that you'll be showing.
Great. Well, as a matter of fact, let's take a look at that clip,
All right.
Because I think it's a great way for people to see what this project's about.
Now we're on to a real political fight with the fossil fuel industry that at the moment we're losing.
It's a very one-sided perspective on these matters.
The huge asymmetry in the access to the media of the genuine scientists who are actually doing the research and understand the data versus these disinformation purveyors who are often supported by big, PR networks and teams of people who are promoting them, getting them on television, arranging public lectures and all the rest.
I think the media has a big responsibility here, and it has not been living up to that responsibility.
And so the scientific community understands that these claims are wrong, that they're misrepresentations, but the public is left thinking that, global warming could be explained by the sun, which is just not true. Lawsuits against the tobacco industry really helped to expose the way in which the tobacco industry had deliberately and consciously and in a very organized fashion, using public relations and advertising and market research, had consciously and deliberately set out to confuse the American people about the hazards of tobacco. We've seen almost the identical story here now with the fossil fuel industry and think tanks sending out misinformation about climate change.
There's a kind of money pollution in our system that's as grievous as every other kind of pollution, and so we have to expose that. We need the big, broad social, political movement that forces serious change in Washington and in capitals around the world. And we're only beginning to sense that that might be possible.
So how do we do that? How do we make that transformation? And it's not hard to imagine an alternative energy system. The world has gone through technological transformations before. We didn't always use fossil fuels. We didn't always use oil and gas. So we know what technological transformation looks like. We know it can be done, and we know that government can play a positive role.
What pushes you? What grabs a hold of you? What gets you up in the morning to do these things? So they take a heck of a lot of work to put an independent project together.
Yeah, it's a number of factors. I mean, from long ago, I once sort of considered myself to be an armchair activist and also an armchair media critic. I was seeing a lot of things that I was not very happy about. Also not seeing a lot of things in the media. I mean, what inspired Greetings from Missile Street, which I did in 2000, was the lack of media coverage of Iraqi civilians and how they were living life in the post-Gulf War era.
And that was the 1990, when was that Gulf War?
The Gulf War was 1991, yeah. And it's a combination of that concern about the state of American media nowadays, and also, frankly, just really enjoying, as difficult as it can be in different ways at different times. I knew pretty much from the first general video production class that I took at a place called the Boston Film and Video Foundation back in the late 90s that I had found something that I really loved doing and really wanted to do for my life's work.
And speaking of things that you love doing, you were trained as a lawyer, right?
Yeah, I've got a JD from Vermont Law School. You know, I think that some of that education and training and so on does come into this kind of stuff, because you know, I've had some people you know, refer to me as an activist media person, or you know, that kind of thing, and in a sense it is making a case. You know, in Out of Balance, it was making the case against ExxonMobil, and as I'm sure you recall, we were very careful to stick to not speculative stuff, and not stuff that we were unable to back up with facts, but stick to the stuff where there's really facts that we could show. And you know, that's how to do it, and that's how to make a case if you want to do that kind of thing. And you know, in this sort of situation, whether it's Greetings from Missile Street or Out of Balance or At Any Cost, it really comes down to, you know, sort of being a David taking on a Goliath, and you'd better be able to make your case.
Yeah. So that'll do us for this week on The Green Screen. Join us next week for more solutions.